morning. I've got some big boots to fill with Peter and Lucinda. Hi, I'm Amy. Just a little bit about me, and it's amazing, we're at a conference here on healthy active cities, and I'm now doing a pitch on cars, where I normally talk about walking and cycling, but bear with me. So just a little bit about me. Urban strategist sounds amazing. Really, I'm a transport planner. That's what I started off doing. Generally worked on large infrastructure projects with sort of a sports feel. So I've worked on the Olympics and recently on Perth Stadium. Sorry, I'm terrible with these things as well. I normally prance around the stage. But in my job, I sit there and I like listening to conversations, and I sit with a team of engineers and ITS experts and road designers, and there's all this chit chatter in the background about these amazing things that are coming, these new cars, and they're going to solve all our issues. And I sit there going, oh, really? I might as well, ditch this walking and cycling strategy I'm working on, because all our problems are going to be solved. So I want to have a quick chat with you today. I've only got 20 minutes. I probably could speak for hours. This is sort of an overview of what I want to talk about. But let's start with a quick history of car-dominated cities. Now, this is the history according to me. But hopefully it just gives you an idea of where my frustrations have come from, and anybody that's got frustrations with AVs. So 14th century, walkable settlements. We only had our feet. We designed some really beautiful cities and towns. A lot of these live today in Europe. We go and visit them, medieval towns, easy to walk around. And then Mr. Henry Ford came along, 1908. We were all worried about horse and carts, but then this thing came along, the Model T, 15 million units in 20 years. It changed people's way of travelling. And then the conversation started to change in the way we planned our cities. So you might have heard of Ebenezer Howard, the idea of the garden city, which in some ways is a great thing, but we started to see that, potentially things that move fast, i.e. vehicles, aren't very compatible with humans. So this was Radburn, one of the first garden cities that was built in New Jersey. As you can see, some great pictures there, but it's all about that separation. The kids need to be safe away from cars. We then started to see this rise of segregation. These pictures are from Traffic in Towns, a Colin Buchanan report from the 1960s. Actually a great report from its time, but there were some things that were relatively flawed if we look back now. This idea, again, of separating vehicles from humans because they can't interact. And as always, the traffic engineers got hold of that, and we ended up with this. Here's some pictures from the UK, where I'm originally from. And we're living with this now, this ensuing sort of segregation of uses, which has made our cities and our towns unwalkable. However, thankfully, there's this driver of change. Arup's done a lot of work in this area. We've got our Walking World report, looking at these global and social trends that are changing the way we plan our cities. And that's why we're here today. We're recognising that communities want cities and towns and spaces they can walk. There's health benefits to that. We've got an ageing population. They want to be closer to amenities. They want to be closer to people. Just as Lucinda just talked about, these are the reasons we need to create communities that people can be together. But the future is coming. This is what I'm told. Connected and autonomous vehicles. They look great. So these are the pictures I now see regularly, any event I'm at. Now, if any of you have seen the film WALL-E, yes, I don't show that because I don't want to be sued by Disney. But yeah, this is it. This is the future, guys. This is how you're getting to work. But in all seriousness, these are the other pictures that we're sold. Now, they're great. I'm sure this is a great work done by some well-renowned urban designer or landscape architect. And it paints a really great picture. But my worry is will we really get that? Because that shows a bit of utopia. Where are really all the people? And suddenly, where have all our vehicles gone? I just want to give a little bit, obviously I recognise I probably know a little bit about autonomous vehicles just through osmosis, through work. And there's a few things to consider, because some people, there's different ways autonomous vehicles are going to either come to us. There's this idea that there's sort of evolutionary. So there's cars now which have a lot of autonomous vehicle technology. So sort of adaptive cruise control, sensors. I even saw an advert, I think for a new Toyota yesterday, where somebody walked out in front of a car with headphones and the car stops. So there's all this technology. But then we have this revolutionary idea that we're going to have full automation. So these are cars that literally turn up, you get in, you don't need to do anything, and it takes you where you are. So that's a bit of context and a bit of background. And in the slides I'm going to show you, there's also something to think about in terms of the car ownership model. Now, there's no answer to this yet. These are still the discussions we're having. The world of autonomous vehicles, is it going to be a private ownership model, which we have now, but we're starting to see a change, or is it going to be fully shared? And I think these are things to keep in the back of your mind, because depending on what model we end up with or how we transition to those different models really impacts the way that these vehicles could impact our cities. So, cities of the future, are they going to be walkability or automobility? I think I made that word up, but it's an interesting question. So walkable environments, I don't want to preach the converted in here. We all know how to make great walkable environments. It's all about connectivity, making the pedestrian feel comfortable, convenience, so walking becomes the most convenient mode. That sense of place, stuff that Lucinda was talking about, these are all the ingredients that make a walkable in community. Sorry. So, autonomous vehicles. What are some of the things that they could lead to? And I think with my presentation here, I don't want to give any answers because we don't really know at the moment, and I guess this is some areas of research and for us as practitioners to try and start to think about. But you'll hear one of the big arguments, or one of the pros and cons of autonomous vehicles is, what does it mean for our urban patterns? Suburbanisation, something we're dealing with a lot at the moment, trying to retrofit these communities to be more walkable and more livable. So what does AVs mean? AVs now are going to make travelling more convenient. So one of the things about living in suburbia at the moment is potentially it's not convenient because you have to drive everywhere. But now if you can sit in your car and you can work, or you can talk to your kids, or you can catch up on the daily Netflix shows, will living in suburbia become, again, more convenient? But on the other side, because of autonomous vehicles, and particularly if they're going to be electric, some of the issues that we have from vehicle use, such as air and noise pollution, are going to be reduced. Also, there's not going to be such a need for parking. So do we actually end up with easier densification? Some of the issues we have with densification at the moment is access for vehicles. So two sides of the story. So I think we know what we would like, but how do we ensure we get what we like? Street design and public realm. Oh, this is the pessimist in me comes out. Everyone says, oh, it'd be great when we have autonomous vehicles, you won't need to provide a 3.5 metre traffic lane. These are the conversations I have with my traffic engineers and the team. And, there's two options here. That space goes over to public realm, and that's something we're told regularly about autonomous vehicles. It'd be more space for people. But something in me niggles, well, that just means you could have more capacity. The easy option will be you can just get more vehicles through a road because you haven't got the capacity constraints of a human drive car. So what are we going to end up with? Increased capacity on roads for more private vehicles, particularly in the private vehicle shared ownership model, or are we going to end up with nicer streets? Parking. Oh, lots of things about parking. There's definite pros, but there's also a few cons. And the point of this slide is potentially we won't need to park vehicles anymore. They'll be going off to some hub somewhere, but not parking within our cities, which is obviously a great benefit. But then now we're going to potentially need lots of drop-off facilities. So we're even talking some of our clients about how much drop-off is going to be needed for AVs. So these beautiful streets that we could be designing could just be massive drop-off zones, which might not have that lovely greening and that community benefit. Our streets just become very transient for vehicles. Space, so this is a positive again. So now we can move the space potentially from private vehicles to space for people. And this is some great work that's been done by an urbanist out of the US, showing some potential benefits for our streets, so we can take away that parking and give it back to people. And I think this is Cremorne in Melbourne, where I'm from, and it's something about the discussion we were having earlier about private vehicle access to buildings actually can ruin our street plane. So in an AV world, potentially we don't need to have that access, so it can become more active for people as long as it's not just one big drop-off area. My last point on parking, really interesting, parking revenue. See, I can't believe I'm discussing this. But City of Perth, they have a scheme where parking pays for infrastructure funding for a local cat bus and for walking and cycling improvements. And as you can see, 42% of the City of Perth income comes from parking revenue. So now, if there is no need for all this private parking revenue, where does that funding come from? And it's just something we need to start to bear in mind. And I think it shows that we need to be more resilient in terms of where we're getting monies from, that we can't rely on private vehicle money in the future. So I think my biggest worry with AVs is cities are really dynamic. Our communities are dynamic places. Things happen, very different things happen. And how do we teach something that's robotic about the way we are as humans? So we're told there's this utopian vision here of people playing in the streets, which, to be honest, we could do now. There's nothing new. We can do that through good design. But then I don't know if any of you saw that video of that AV going along and it hit a kangaroo, a blow-up kangaroo in Adelaide. And these vehicles now will stop as soon as they see a human. So what does that mean, again, for throughput and capacity? My worry is that the traffic engineers in us will start to separate pedestrians from vehicles again. And we know that actually we need to be combining all these different land uses to have a better street environment. Sense of place, social interactions, again, coming back to what Lucinda was saying, is a lot of the interaction they have with the outside world is meeting people in the street, in coffee shops, just going to the shops, walking to the train station. But in an autonomous vehicle world, will the convenience of just stepping into a private vehicle that takes us and drops us off outside our place of work, our school or shopping centre, does that take away those daily social interactions that are so important for people's health and well-being? And finally, equitable mobility. AVs obviously have a great benefit for people that are less mobile, particularly the elderly or those with physical constraints that can't drive. This now means that they will have potential sense of freedom for much longer in their lives. But we've got to be cognizant of people that can't, depending on the pricing model, that might not be able to afford these vehicles. And also, some people aren't so tech savvy. Obviously, there's going to be this generational shift, but depending how quickly they come, what does it mean for those people that either are unsure of using technology or just don't want to get in a small space vehicle with other people? So my final thoughts. I regularly get asked, how do we change this strategy, for example, a walking strategy, to compensate for the AVs that are coming? I think we all know as practitioners what we want for our cities and our streets and our communities. AVs are just another tool to us to help to create that. So we just need to stand by our evidence-based policy. You want to create this? Well, how do we use AVs to create that? It shouldn't be the other way around. We shouldn't be bullied by tech companies to say, well, these are coming, deal with it. That's so important to ensure that we don't end up with the issues that we're pursuing now in private vehicle dominance. And obviously, you've got to quote Jeff Speck, anything to do with walking or healthy cities. And I think this is a great quote. It's going to be really interesting in maybe 5, 10, 15 years' time, once we see more and more of these vehicles entering our streets, just to see how pedestrians react. And I think pedestrians are a great indicator of how livable our streets and cities are. So thank you.